I find the open sea scary. Just the idea of floating away into nothingness is terrifying. Being in a place where you look around and the only thing you can see is blue. No signs of land, just that enormous, vast, immense, endless blue. It's a natural human fear after all, the lack of certainty, the helpless nature of solitude, the absence of knowledge. But the only way to gain that knowledge is to face that nothingness, to step into the unknown and conquer those fears. That's what amazes me about migrations by sea. They are a major part of human history, of how cultures spread around the world, and yet they require such level of bravery. Oh yeah, this is a video about Pokemon, right? Where was I going with this? Oh yeah. Game Freak seems to love incorporating real-life history into the design of their games. Many of their characters seem to have some level of influence from historical events and the people who took part of them. And there's one particular group of people who seem to have been influenced for a certain culture of the Pokemon world. A while ago, I made a video about the Draconid people and their connections with different places of the Pokemon world. But there's something I didn't mention back then. I didn't talk about how I always noticed some similarities between the Seafolk and a real migratory process. I was lacking a few connecting points to make the hypothesis stronger, until recently, when the pieces started to fall into place. Today we are going to talk about ancient Japan, genetics, anthropology, and other topics, in order to explain what inspired Game Freak to create the Draconids and the Seafolk village. The Draconid people are an aboriginal culture who live in the Hoenn region. They have been present in this place for thousands of years, being witnesses to the ancient clashes between the legendary Kyogre and Groudon. The Meteor Falls was their home, a cave where they guarded themselves from the constant natural disasters that troubled the region at the time. They also left a noticeable mark in the granite cave, with a mural depicting the events from those primal days, similar to what they did in the Sky Pillar. They are the ones responsible for keeping the history of the region alive. Zinnia herself explains how the Draconids are not just random dragon-type trainers, but a major part of Hoenn's history, holding the secrets to primal reversion, infinity energy, Rayquaza, and the orbits of meteors. And the Draconids have a clear influence in the people of the region. For example, next to the Sky Pillar is Pacific Log Town. The inhabitants of this town, built on wooden rafts and logs, already live in a traditional manner, but they are also aware of the legends of the region, with people talking about Rayquaza and also about the Regis, the titans who, in order to capture, you must first visit the sealed chamber nearby the town. Titans who are hidden behind seals, which you have to open using moves that only 4 Pokemon in the region learn by leveling up. 3 of those Pokemon are Pokemon used by the Draconids. Okay, we are going a bit too fast, but what I want to point out the most for now is how that close relationship to the past of the region paint the Draconids like this opposing idea to what the people like Steven and the Devon Corporation represent. They are the technological development and progress of the region versus the traditional, familiar, and more connected to nature side of Hoennian culture. And that makes me think, could this idea be inspired or influenced by real-world elements? I think the answer is yes. And it's through that inspiration that we will not only understand the Draconids better, but also start to connect them to the Seafolk village. As I said, the Draconids seem to represent the ancient Hoenn region, but through that aspect they are also a representation of ancient Japan. There are different living theories as to how the first inhabitants reached and established themselves in the islands. The presence of humans in Japanese soil can be traced back to 35,000 years ago, when people from the continent used the land bridges that existed at the time to reach what is now the nation of Japan. Where did they come from? There isn't a definitive answer, but some of the most accepted theories are an arrival of people from the Korean peninsula to the north of Kyushu, island which inspired the Hoenn region, or a migration from Sakhalin in the north to Hokkaido. But there's a second migration that takes place around 10 to 13,000 years ago. People from Taiwan and Okinawa are believed to have reached mainland Japan, making contact once again in Kyushu. It is around this time where a prehistoric era known as the Jomon period starts, as a consequence of the mixture of the people who came from the south with the already present population of the islands. The humans of the Jomon period were all over Japan, and while they were not a homogeneous group, they shared many cultural characteristics. They were mostly hunter-gatherers, but not nomads. They did practice agriculture, but on a small scale, and their religion consisted of animistic rituals, the origin of Shintoism. But they are mostly known for their works of pottery, between which the most recognizable pieces are the dogu figures, clay effigies representing people, possibly made with religious intent. The most iconic dogu is the Shakoki dogu. This one is the inspiration behind Claydol, a Pokemon that is basically a golem, a figure of clay that was given life by energy, a characteristic it shares with the Regis, who we already linked to the Draconids, and Claydol can be found at Sky Pillar, while its pre-evolution appears at the desert, where Regirock was sealed away. Back to the Jomon. This period of Japanese history will last until around 1000 to 300 years BC, when the Jomon population would start to shrink, and a group of people known as the Yayoi reached Japan, and with them a revolution to the lifestyle of the people of the islands began, as well as a new period named after them. The Yayoi were into big-scale agriculture, had knowledge of metallurgy, and a social structure influenced by Chinese tradition. The Yayoi assimilated most of the Jomon people and made the Honshu island their own, leaving the Jomon groups from the south and north separated. This is the origin of what eventually became the three main ethnic groups of Japan. In Hokkaido, the Ainu. In Honshu, the mixture of Yayoi and Jomon, the Yamato, which nowadays makes the majority of Japanese people. And finally, the group which is the biggest influence for the Draconids. Present in mostly Kyushu and the Ryukyu Islands, the Ryukyuan people are the third Japanese subgroup, pretty much culture of their own, even if they had been almost assimilated to the predominant Japanese tradition. Their religion is filled with concepts indicating care for the balance between nature and human intervention, the living and the dead, which already parallels Sinia's attitude towards Devon's plan for the Delta meteor. But the Ryukyu people also practice what is known as veneration of the ancestors. This means they would execute rituals in order to show respect towards the previous generations of their families, building altars for them. They had different levels of ancestors depending on their antiquity, dividing them into ages. The ones that go up to 25 generations back are the present age. The ones that are older than that are the Middle Age. And what is beyond that? Well, Ryukyuans believe that when the first kami, the gods of the world, appeared, that was also the moment the ultimate ancestors were born, the ones from which all life comes from. Utin, heaven, father, Jiichi is earth, the mother, and Ryugu is the sea, the place from which life originates, as it is beyond the sea where the land of the gods is located. These show a clear similarity to the myths of the Hoenn region. Rayquaza, Groudon and Kyogre represent the exact same elements: heaven, earth and sea, and the idea of a place where life originates is present in Hoenn. The Cave of Origin, the place where you have your final battle against Groudon or Kyogre, is said to be the location from which all life comes from. And notice how this place, Granite Cave and the Meteor Falls are caves, and the places where the Ryukyuans made rituals for the ancient ancestors were most of the time caves, called Utaki. This could also explain why the Cave of Origin is named Shrine of Awakening in Japan. That explains why this place and Mount Pyre are so significant for the legendary Pokemon, the place where life begins and the place where it ends. Oh, and I didn't mention the name of the age when the Kami and the Ultimate Ancestors appeared. It is called the Usai-Chiyu, the Ancient Age, similar to what Zinnia calls the times when Groudon and Kyogre fought over the energy pouring from the earth. It is also important to point out that Ryukyuan rituals were executed only by women, as their society had many matriarchal elements. The Noro was the most important priestess of their religion and were the ones who took care of the Utaki. Why is this important? Well, every Draconid with a level of authority we know of are women. Zinnia, her grandmother, and Aster are all female Draconids. Not Aster the Wismore, Aster the Lore Keeper who preceded Zinnia in the charge, until she was killed by the Demon Corporation. More on that later. And did you guys notice all those spirals carved in locations related to the Draconids? They are most likely references to the motifs present in Jomon pottery, but they also remind me of the spiral theme from the symbol of the Ryukyu Kingdom, which also looks a lot like the Dynamax logo. Eternatus is a dragon-type Pokemon, these are Draconids, there might be a connection there, but I digress. Back to the important stuff. I've mentioned the link between the Draconids and the Regis, but I didn't mention what this means for our subject. The Regis are not only found in the Hoenn region, you can find them in the Unaband underground ruins, different locations of the Sinnoh region, and now the Galarian Crown Tundra, with the addition of Regieleki and Regidrago. Also, it's important to mention that the same Braille system of writing used in the Seal Chamber is present in the Sabi Islands, in locations where we can find the Ruby and Sapphire. Stones not only linked to the Weather Trio, but in the manga they are used to control the Oxys, Pokemon who came to the Earth in the meteor from the Draconid prophecy. This indicates that the Draconids traveled to these regions in the past to hide the Regis, and we know they are not strangers to these kinds of travels. The embedded tower in Johto was built by people from Hoenn to use it as a place of worship for the Weather Trio. These people had to be Draconids. Aster died defending this place of the Devon Corporation, and there's the Dragon Tamer clan from Blackthorn City. Their leader wears a Rayquaza helmet on the manga, and they are named after a trainer class introduced in Gen 3, with all of the trainers classified as one appearing at the Meteor Falls. But how did the Draconids reach these regions? Well, the people from Pacific Log are said to be descendants of people who were born and lived their whole lives in the sea. This description fits a lot with the people of the Seafolk village. The village is already pretty similar looking to Pacific Log, but what confirms this connection is the presence of a Moob tutor in the village, one who can teach your Pokemon Dragon Ascent, the Moob used by Rayquaza to Mega Evolve. Moob Zinnia teaches to Rayquaza in Auras. And the village is also similar to Summertime in the Fury region from Pokemon Ranger, region with temples dedicated to the Weather Trio. That explains the presence of Draconid iconography and the Regis all over the world. But if the Draconids are the people from Ryukyu, what are the Seafolk? The Seafolk are mysterious. They skillfully manipulate boats, riding the waves with their knowledge of the stars, visiting each region of the world with knowledge of every legend and riddle. They one time received a windfall of treasure. Even they themselves do not know where they came from or when they began their boat voyages. This can be read in a book found in the Mali library, a book titled Falling In with the Seafolk. This description and the fact that the Seafolk village is located in Alola region based after Hawaii always made me think there was a link between them and a particular migratory process from thousands of years ago. And now I have evidence. Thanks to genetic research, it was discovered that the Ryukyuans are more genetically similar to the Ainu and the ancient Jomon people than to the Yamato. This is because while the Yamato do have Jomon genes, they show more similarities with East Asian people, mainly of Korean and Chinese origin. But there's a thing these groups have in common that is most likely related to their Jomon roots. Again, most of what I'm going to talk about now is only theoretical, but it has an important level of acceptance within the scientific community. The same genetic studies that I mentioned found something interesting. The Jomon genes present in all of the Japanese ethnic groups show the presence of a certain haplogroup. Haplogroups are collections of genes which are inherited from only one of the parents, with a combination of alleles that repeats in people who are directly related, allowing us to trace back ancestry through those haplogroups. In the case of the Jomon, it was discovered that they were not connected to modern-day Asians, the opposite to the Yayoi. The haplogroup responsible for this, which now has a stronger presence outside of the Yamato, is the Y chromosome haplogroup D, a group that is absent in almost the whole world outside of Japan, and two other places, Tibet and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So what does this mean? Well, there are different theories, but looking into where these groups are located, it is possible that the first people who reached Japan were related to an ancient group of dark-skinned Asians, who were the ancestors of the Andamanese and Tibeto-Burman people, a group that would eventually disappear or disperse throughout Southeast Asia, being replaced in the continent by the ancestors of modern-day Chinese people. But the interesting part is that the placement of these people in Southeast Asia could indicate a relationship with the Austronesian cultures. The Austronesian are many cultures joined by their shared linguistic roots, with most of them being represented by Taiwanese indigenous groups and people from Southeast Asia. The Austronesians initiated one of the biggest migratory events ever, so big there are many theories of how it started, but the most accepted one is the out-of-Taiwan model. Around 10,000 BC, Proto-Austronesian people started to move from China to Taiwan. This lasted until around 4,000 years later. But then, in the year 3000 BC, the large-scale expansion started. Austronesians sailed away on search of new land, and boy, they did find new land. They went far beyond Taiwan and Southeast Asia, reaching Micronesia, New Guinea, Melanesia, Polynesia, Madagascar, and New Zealand. And besides that, what connection do they have with the Seafolk? They developed maps of the stars they would use at night to calculate their location, even having into consideration different times of the year and how that affects the night sky. And they also knew how to do that using the movement of the waving waters. Remember, the Seafolk do these things. They also settled in Hawaii, just like the Seafolk did in Alola. And how convenient, some authors think Japanese Ryukyuan language is connected to the Austronesian linguistic family, which wouldn't be surprising really. The guys reached Madagascar. Just take a look at how close Ryukyu is to Taiwan. And this is what the Seafolk represent. They are an ancient group of sailors who reached Hoenn and most likely had contact with the Draconids of the Primal Era, which led into a cultural exchange between them, and this is why you can find evidence of Draconid activity all over the Pokemon world, possibly even in Galar. And I think Game Freak had this reference planned out since the beginning, since they first depicted Kyushu back in Gen 3. So let's end this with... the Granite Cave, another of the caves connected to the Draconids. This place is inhabited by many Pokemon species, all of them pretty fitting for this location, but there's one that is intriguing. Nosepass isn't just another Pokemon, it is really significant. Besides of the Granite Cave, it can be found in the underground ruins from Unova, where the Regis are trapped. Also, Mount Coronet. The iceberg ruins of Regis are located within Mount Coronet. Not to mention that a Probopass appears guarding the Snow Point Temple in Pokemon Generations, temple built for Regigigas. They are present in Akala, and Olivia uses one of them, and they also appear in Kalos Route 10, a route related to infinity energy the Draconids seem to understand better than anyone. But why? Well, Nosepass is based after the Moai, the statues from the Easter Island, or Rapa Nui in Polynesian. Yeah, the Austronesian migration also reached this place. The Moai were built by Polynesian colonizers of the islands, but they are not only connected to the Austronesians through their Moai inspiration. Remember, Nosepass is basically a compass, always pointing to the north with its nose. Maybe the Seafolk used them as a method of geolocation. As the Pokédex said back in Gen 3, its magnetic nose constantly faces north. Travelers check Nosepass to get their bearings, a guide for their voyages into the vast blue of the sea. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you guys find it as interesting as it was for me while doing the research for the video. Everything surrounding the Draconids and the Seafolk village really catches my imagination. They truly seem to be the key to understanding the ongoing narrative of the Pokemon franchise. Look out for stuff I talk about today in the Crown Tundra, because the presence of the Regis indicates that we have yet to see the full spectrum of the Seafolk influence in the Pokemon world. Don't forget to check Eduardo's Twitter account. He helped with the video. I wouldn't have noticed some stuff I talked about today if it wasn't for him, and he really deserves a lot of attention with his research about the lore of the franchise and its symbolism. Highly recommended. This is the part of the video where I do the YouTube thing, right? The remind you to sub, like the video, follow me on Twitter, support the channel and Patreon, right? All of that stuff. Yeah, well, I just did. And finally, thanks for watching. It is always a pleasure. And before leaving, always remember,